Hello everyone, welcome back. So in previous lecture we discussed about one-to-one relationship mapping, right? And also we have inserted employee details and passport details as well by using JPA repository, right? So now let me insert one more record and I will explain you further topic. Okay, let me open the browser and I'm opening Talent API to test our REST APIs. So before that, let me start the server. Employee. So now before that, let me open the employee table. So currently we have two records in employee table and in passport we have two records. So if you observe the moment we insert the details, so you can see passport detail is having primary key. So one record one and another primary key two. So two records we have in passport table, right? So these two primary key will be inserted in employee table. You can see here employee table is having passport underscore id, though these two are belongs to passport primary keys of passport numbers. So what is the meaning of that? So employee table is owning the relationship. So one to one relationship, nothing but. So employee is associated with passport table. So and who is the owning the relationship here? So employee is owning the relationship. Why? Because so employees table is having passport underscore id, nothing but. So employee is owning the relationship. Okay, so in passport table you have only two columns, id and number. So here passport become as a non-owning relationship. So passport is non-owning relationship. Why? Because so passport doesn't have employee id. So passport is having only passport id and number. So it's independently. So passport is having independently. So it doesn't have any primary key of employee uh, employee primary key. So who is having a foreign key relationship? Employee table is having foreign key relationship. So that is the reason employee is owning the one-to-one relationship. So employee is owning the relationship. You have to understand that concept, guys. Okay. So this is called unidirectional mapping. What we can call unidirectional mapping. Let me open the Notepad++. So one employee can associated with one passport. So who is the owner? We have created who is the owning the relationship? Employee is owning the relationship. Employee table is owning the relationship. So this is called unidirectional mapping. Unidirectional mapping. Unidirectional map in the sense only whenever you are fetching the employee details, along with the employee details we are going to fetch the passport details. But when we are trying to fetch the passport details, you cannot get the employee details because it is who is the owner? Employee table is the owner. Passport is not owner of the a relationship because passport doesn't have employee properties. That is the reason passport table is a independent table and it does not associated with any relationship. Only employee is associated with passport and it is having relationship with passport. So that is the reason employee is owning side. Okay, owning side relationship is having employee table. So okay, or employee entity. So now let me fetch the data. So find employee. So how we can fetch? So I want to fetch employee details. So what is the API to fetch the employee details? Let me go to REST controller. Okay, I haven't implemented find API. Yeah? Okay, so then let me implement uh, fetch the employee details. Okay, so we have inserted the data, right? Employee in passport details. So now I want to fetch employee details. We'll see what will happen. So now to fetch the employee information, so we need to create the REST API, public, and let me put as of now avoid and find employee. Okay, so find employee. So to find the employee, I want to go with the path variable. So as part of path variable, as part of the request path variable, I will send as an input to find the employee. Okay, so now based on the primary key of employee ID, we can search the values. Employee specific employee we can search. Okay, so here employee ID. Okay, so now, so to if you find the employee, what is the return type? It should be it should be specific employee which is coming from database, right? So whenever you are finding specific employee, this method should return employee details. So then let me write employee details. Okay, let me copy same thing here. Response entity of employee. So as of now, return null. So let me call employee service dot find by employee. Okay, so we haven't implemented business logic to find the employee in service IMPL, right? So let me implement that. So go to employee service IMPL. So here, so we need to write business logic to find the employee. So let me implement abstract method in interface. So return type should be employee and find employee find employee by ID. So we need to pass employee ID as input to fetch the employee, right? So that's it. So now we need to override this method in implementation class. So here we just need to implement add clear put cursor on employee service impl and then add an implemented method. So now from here I can return the logic to find the employee. So business logic. So password.jpa repository dot find by there is a jpa repository having there is a method called find by id. So find by id we can pass employee id as an input and then it will give the object, then we will have a get method. So it will return employee. Why it is giving error? Let me check. Cannot convert from passport to, oh sorry, so we have to fetch the employee details, right? With the help of employee jpa repository we have to fetch the employee. That's it. See, whenever we are modifying the changes, automatically in background server is restarting, right? Because our whatever changes we have done, those changes will be reflected into embedded tomcat server. So that is because of we have added a dev tools, right? Dev tools dependency in pom.xml. Okay, so now I have implemented the business logic to find the employee, right? So now let me go to REST controller. We can call find employee ID method by using employee service dot get, sorry, find employee by ID. So this should return response entity, right? We are expecting response entity of employee. So what I will do, I will just copy same as is, and so here we just need to call this one, just needs to pass as part of first argument. Then to find the employee, so responses code will be okay, nothing but success. So that's it. So now this is we do not need. Return. If you have confusion to write this logic, so we can do another way also. Let me write that also. Some people may confuse why we are passing this into as an argument. So what we can do in another way, so we have find the employee details, right? So what this method will return, this method will return employee object, right? So we can do employee and employee. So the moment find employee, fetch the employee details, so it will return employee object. So we can pass this employee directly to the response entity of constructor, right? That's it. That's it. So here we are passing HTTP. Okay. So some people, so based on the requirement, you have to write the return type, guys. Some people may return directly employee also. That is also we can do, but response code we cannot specify. So how it is, so let me tell you that is also. So if you want if you don't want to send it as a response entity, so whenever we are writing response, we are using RESTful web service, right? Whenever we are writing RESTful web services, it is always recommended to return response entity. Why? Because we, along with the response entity, we can send the HTTP status respective status code also to differentiate whether it is created or the resource created or resource updated or resource fetch. Okay, that is the purpose. I am returning response entity of employee. So this is how we can return as well. Okay, so now we need to define the API at the rate. So find employee should be get API, right? So we have to, it should be HTTP request should be get mapping. So get mapping, and then we'll specify find employee. Now we can invoke this API from REST client to fetch the employee details. So here in a service layer, I have written logic to fetch the employee details from database by by passing the input employee ID. Okay. So now let me go to REST client. So what is the API to find the employee? Find employee. So oh, sorry, one second. So in go to the controller, we need to pass input, right? As part of path variable, we have to send the input. So how we can define the path variable? Slash open curly brace and close curly brace. That's it. So here you need to pass ID. So the ID which you are passing it here, same name you have to give it here. Okay. So now go to REST client and slash your API slash input we need to pass. So which employee details we can fetch? I want to fetch employee number 3. Employee number 3 and passport number 2. Okay, so employee number 3 I want to fetch. And what is the HTTP request method? It should be get request. So let me send the request. You can see employee 3 details are successfully came from server, right? So find API is successfully worked actually. So whatever API have written, find API, we are able to find the employee in database. For example, if you want to fetch employee 2, you can find employee 2. You can see, so I haven't changed the first name and last name. That's the reason same results are coming. So if you want testing purpose, what I will do, I will create one more employee with different names, so that some people may confuse why the results are came same. Some, so here I will keep Rohit Sharma Rohit is the first name, Sharma is the last name. His passport I will give it as a R. And then let me send the request. You can see employee details. Rohit Sharma is inserted. Rohit inserted successfully. Rohit first name and last name and passport. So Rohit is inserted successfully. So let me create one more guy. Uh, Shubman Gill. His employee passport number I will give as a G. Okay, so now passport number, dummy passport number I have given here. 4 or something. Okay, so now send the request. So I have created two records. So now open the database. You can see here also. Refresh the database. So Rohit Sharma is also inserted. Shubman Gill also inserted. So Rohit Sharma's passport ID is mapped with passport table. You can see passport table is already there. So Rohit Sharma is having passport of this one, and Shubman Gill is having passport of this number, right? So now I want to fetch the Shubman Gill's passport number. So sorry, Shubman Gill's employee details. So what is the Shubman Gill's employee number? Number 5. How we can find the employee? Find employee API slash 5. I want to fetch Shubman Gill employee details. Get request and send the request. So you can see we got the Shubman Gill's record successfully. So if you observe here guys, one more important concept. So I want to fetch the employee details, but even if I fetch the employee details, I am getting passport details also, because this is a drawback actually. So why I am getting passport details? Because employee is having relationship with passport. That's the reason whenever we are fetching the employee, so along with the employee details we are getting passport details as well. So this is called actually eager loading. So if you open the console, check the log. Let me clear the console, and let me send the request again. Send the request. So I invoke the API to find the employee details, right? So I got the response, and you can check, open the console and check. You can see I am trying to fetch the employee details, but what is happening? So Hibernate is joining, left to join with passport details as well. So whether we need passport details or not, Hibernate is always sending passport details. So this is called eager loading. The moment employee details is having relationship with passport, but because of that, whenever I am trying to fetch employee details, I am getting passport details as well, because employee is owning the relationship with passport table. So this is called eager loading. Whenever you are trying to fetch employee details, along with the employee details, passport details also returning, right? So that is the reason we can call it as a eager loading. Technically we can call eager loading. So if you go to in entity, eager loading or eager fetch. So here how there is a fetch operation. If you don't specify any fetch operation, by default it is a eager loading. Eager loading in the sense both the employee details also, passport details also coming as part of response while invoking employee API. So fetch operation, you can see fetch equal to, what is the fetch type? Eager loading. So eager loading, it will perform by default eager loading even without giving that. So by default, so I am giving manually eager loading. So let me try, let me clear the console. Let me send the request and open the console. See, select column names from employee and joining with the passport details. This is called eager loading. So this will have performance issues actually. So why? Because I want to fetch only employee details, but I am getting passport details also. Sometimes I may have requirement, I want only employee details, I don't want passport details. That time this eager loading will give performance issue. Why performance issue? Whenever you are trying to fetch employee details along with the employee, whether you needed or not needed, always passport details also will come as part of the response, right? So this is one drawback. So for example, if you want to only fetch employee details, unnecessarily fetching passport details is incorrect, and it will have performance issues. So that's the reason what we can do to avoid that. So we can use lazy loading. There is a option called lazy. So lazy loading in the sense, so if you want to fetch the specific employee details, so Hibernate will always execute the query to fetch employee only. So it will not join passport table. Okay, so let me show you that. Clear the console and send the request. So we got the exception here. Why? Because, so let me open the console and show you the exception. What is that exception? You can see we got the exception like no serialization found, right? No serialization found, and it is showing Hibernate lazy initializer. So why? Because, so you can see here, so it is trying to when I'm trying to fetch the employee, when I'm invoking employee find employee API, so Hibernate is created only select star from employee. You can observe it. So I have given here fetch type as lazy, right? Fetch type as lazy. So because of that, Hibernate is fetching only employee details. You can see Hibernate is trying to fetch only employee details. You can see select columns from employee. Earlier in eager loading, what it happened, it is fetching along with the employee details, it is doing left join and fetching passport details also. So where in lazy loading, so you can see here I have specified fetch type as a lazy, and then Hibernate is fetching only employee details. And if you check in below, and it is also fetching passport details. Why? Because, so once the results are returned, right, so in employee details we have a get employee method, right? So the moment get employee method is being called, that time Hibernate is trying to fetch passport details. So that is the advantage of lazy loading. So whenever you needed passport details, that time only you will get the passport details. So Hibernate will generate the select statement to fetch the passport details whenever you needed. So when that get passport details are being called, that is called being called from in your employee uh, entity class, you have a get passport method, right? So the moment when this method will call, so whenever in REST API, so when you find the employee, it should return respective employee object. In the sense, respective employee object, in the sense it will return all the employee details. How all the employee details will be returned? By calling getter methods, by calling getter methods of employee details. So in employee details, while fetching the get passport, while invoking the get passport, well, while mapping the data with passport, sorry, employee properties, that time this get passport method is being called. So that time only Hibernate is created this query to fetch the passport details. Okay, so if you want, I will show you debug mode, in debug mode. Okay, so let me stop the server and let me run in debug mode, so that you will get, I will understand that. Okay, so let me put breakpoint in service layer, and sorry, implementation layer. I will put breakpoint in fetch employee. So let me enable breakpoint. How you can enable? You can see there is a button here. So once you enable, your breakpoint is enabled here. So now let me Server is running mode, so I don't think so. Our server is not running mode, I think. Let me check. So no, it's not showing, right? So let me fetch the employee. No, so server is not started. So server is in stop mode, so let me start the server in debug mode. So you can see our server started successfully. So now you can see in our console our server is started successfully in debug mode. So let me clear the console, and now I want to fetch the employee to prove you when Hibernate is trying to fetch passport details in lazy loading operation. So in employee entity table I have given fetch type as a lazy loading. So what is that meaning? So whenever you are trying to fetch the employee, whenever you are trying to fetch the employee, Hibernate will not get passport details. Hibernate will not try to fetch the passport details. Let me send the request. So you can see breakpoint came into the controller, right? Sorry, it came into service layer. I have put breakpoint in service layer. So let me execute it function. So before that I want to fetch breakpoint in get employee as well, because after executing the service layer, so request will uh, went back to entity class. So you can see, so here I cleared the console. You can see I will just put function f8. Yeah, I have just executed function f8, so response will come back to map the results in results with employee properties, right? So now we can see when it is a find employee is being executed in IMPL class in implementation called the moment this method is executed, find employee find by id method is executed, Hibernate is generated only select columns from employee only, select from employee only. So it is not joining with passport table because we are using fetch type lazy. So now you can see, let me now in console we have only employee query, right? So now it response came back to the entity and it is trying to map the all the details with the employee object, right? So now get passport details is being called. Let me clear the console. Instead of clearing console, let it be the same query also. So let me execute this statement function f8. See, so the moment I executed the uh, statement, you can see the moment get passport details or get passport method is invoked, that time only Hibernate is trying to fetch the employee details. This is called lazy loading. So whenever we need specific values, that time only Hibernate will fetch the values. So this is called lazy loading. So this exception, why this exception came, I will tell you the root cause. So in lazy loading operation, the transaction nothing but, so in Hibernate, whenever we are fetching data from the database, each and every request to the database is a one transaction. In previous lecture I already explained you, right? So whenever you are in JPA Hibernate or JPA, whenever you are using entity manager or JPA repository to, whenever we are connecting with the database, that time it is called as a one transaction. So one transaction in the sense, find employee API is trying to fetch the details from database, that is nothing but one transaction. So in lazy loading operation, since we have defined it as a lazy, fetch type is a lazy, in lazy, so that time the moment find by id one time only, so this will treat as a, this method will treat as a one transaction, right? So the moment employee details are fetched from the database, so transaction will start here and transaction also will end it here. That will happen in background. Okay, you no need to bother about it, I am explaining you. So whenever we are trying to fetch the employee details from the database, that is called one transaction in JPA. So since it is a lazy operation, in lazy operation what will happen, transaction will start from by executing this method, and the transaction will end by getting these results. So transaction is started and transaction is stopped successfully by executing this method internally. So now next, why this exception came in background, you can see lazy initialization exception. You can see no serializable found for Hibernate proxy. That means there is no session to fetch uh, passport details. Whenever the get passport method is being executed, that time Hibernate is trying to fetch the employee details, but there is no transaction available, because in background the transaction is successfully opened here and closed here itself. So after once results are returned successfully from this by executing this statement, so transaction successfully end here. So after that, whenever the employee results are trying to map with employee properties, that time it is being get passport method is being called. That time there is no transaction available with JPA repository. So that is the reason we are getting this exception. No serializable found for proxy Hibernate. You can see, so it is being called, what is the exact error, you can see Hibernate lazy loading. In previous version of Spring Boot or traditional Spring Boot application, that time it will clearly shows no serializable and no session is available, it will throw clearly lazy initialization exception. But in latest Spring Boot application, it is showing exception as uh, Hibernate lazy initializer. So to avoid this now, that's the reason this exception is being thrown. You, I think you guys are understood, right? So why this exception is returned, so let me show you one more time. So here I am clearing the console again, I am trying to fetch the employee. So breakpoint came to service layer. The moment this statement is executed, control function F8. So till this time, till executing this statement, we have a transaction started here and ended here during the fetch operation. So and the moment results return back, transaction is closed successfully in background. So now whenever it is trying to map the data with entity table, the response will come back to controller, right? In controller we are returning employee details, so that time, so it is mapping with sorry, employee details are mapping with passport details are trying to map with the employee property passport. So that time get passport method is being invoked. That time Hibernate is trying to fetch the employee passport details. You can see function F8. See, it is trying to fetch the passport details, but there is no transaction available with JPA repository. So that is the reason it is trying to fetch the passport details, but since there is no transaction, that's the reason we are getting this exception. So as part of the response, we got internal server error. So how we can avoid this? We have to ignore this Hibernate lazy initializer. Okay, so or Hibernate lazy initializer, or we can ignore this property. If you ignore this property, so passport details are will not being fetched, being invoked this method. Okay, this get passport method will never invoke if you ignore this property by using at the rate uh, JSON. There is a ignore at the rate JSON ignore annotation. If you specify this, so after once we return the details, invoke the organize the imports. So the eclipse issue, no need to bother. So control shift O. Once you write this at the rate, uh, let me close this window. So once you ignore the property, so let me send the request again. Server is running in debug mode. So the moment find employee is executed, function F8. So now request not went to request is this method is ignored successfully. So that is the reason we got only response of employee details. We haven't fetched the uh, passport details, but this is not the correct solution, ignoring this property. So if you ignore this property, what will happen? So when you are trying to insert the employee details and trying, if you want to fetch the passport details, so you cannot fetch the passport information. So that's the reason we should not ignore. So now what we can do, so let me disable the breakpoint and let me fetch the employee, clear the console. And what kind of exception is thrown? Lazy initialization, right? So you can see in the console we found lazy initialization. In console we got the exception lazy initialization when it is trying to fetch the passport details. So here no serialization, so you can see. So we can ignore this property, lazy initializer, lazy Hibernate lazy initialization. How we can ignore? So there is a annotation here. Here we can fetch, we can ignore that lazy initializer. How we can ignore? There is a ignore JSON ignore properties. So here you can give lazy initializer. That's it. As part of the JSON ignore properties, if you specify Hibernate lazy initializer, so the from where you can copy this. So while fetching the employee details, we got the exception, right? It is clearly mentioned here. Passport, while trying to fetch the passport, we got Hibernate lazy initializer because there is no transaction available. While fetching the get passport method, right? While invoking get passport method in employee post entity class. So now I am ignoring this. So now what will happen, we'll see. Clear the console and fetch the employee details. So you can see we have this after executing find by employee method, and it is and the get employee method also being invoked, but you will not get the passport detail. You can see as part of the response, sorry, you will get the passport details, you will get the passport details. We are ignoring that lazy initializer because there is no transaction available. So now uh, in that is the meaning of lazy loading and eager loading. I think you guys are understood, right? So what is the meaning of lazy loading and eager loading? In eager loading, what is happening, whether if you needed or not needed, Hibernate is fetching both employee and passport details. Let me, I want to debug and show you that as well. So let me put here eager, eager. In eager loading, what will happen? So now in eager loading, this we no need to ignore it, okay? Because in eager loading, so it will until fetching all the sorry, when you are find by employee ID is being executed, that time it will fetch both passport and employee details. How? Let me close the console and send the request. You can see whenever a page invoked, you can see here Hibernate is joining employee table along with passport table, left join. So in uh, eager loading, so this will come as a complete transaction. So transaction will not end it here, transaction will not end here in eager loading operation. So the moment results fetched successfully, that time only transaction will end. So but in lazy initialization, that time transaction will end when the find by employee id find by method executed. That time transaction will end in employee transaction will end in lazy initialization. Okay, so you got right. So what is the lazy loading and eager loading? I will explain you again. In eager loading, so whenever you are trying to fetch the employee, Hibernate will fetch both the details. So when you are when there is a fetch type is lazy, so Hibernate will fetch only employee details, and whenever needed to fetch the passport details, that time only Hibernate will fetch the passport details. Okay, so in this lecture you guys understood lazy loading and eager loading. So so guys, I think you have understood perfectly, right? In next lecture I will explain you another concept. So in lazy loading we should enable this. We have to ignore Hibernate lazy initializer. Okay, so now fetch the employee details. You got both employee and passport details. So in next lecture I will show you this mapping. We can call it as a unidirectional mapping, because employee is having owning the relationship with the passport table. This we can call it as a unidirectional mapping. So in next lecture I will show you bidirectional mapping in the sense passport table also will have employee property. Okay, so thank you guys. If you like this video, you can subscribe and you can watch all the videos uh, by opening. Let me open my website, YouTube channel. So youtube.com/ at the rate Rasul Sheikh / playlist. So if you go to this YouTube portal, YouTube channel, so you can see there is a number of playlist classes are available here. You can watch. Uh, you can learn all the concepts here. Who are all watching newly, so you can watch all the classes step by step. Spring Boot and all the classes are available. Okay, in this course I am going to teach actually AngularJS also. So if you subscribe, so you will get all the latest videos. Okay, thank you guys. We'll catch you in next lecture.